the Health Chat listeners, I'm your host this week, Justine Abson. This is the podcast where we tackle some of the trending topics, ideas and best practice across health and social care. This week, I'm talking to Antony Hall. Antony is the Director of Insights, Assurance and Governance at HC1, the UK's largest elderly residential care provider, which has over 300 care homes and provides positive, personalised care and support to 14,000 residents. So this week, I'm chatting to him about his previous role with CQC, and we want to understand more about how he transferred his skills from one side to the other, where he is now. So thanks again for joining us this week, Antony.
Great to be here. Thanks, Justine.
So I've just mentioned very briefly that we want to talk a little bit about CQC today, about why your relationship with them is so important and how that will help care providers learn and improve. So you used to work for the Care Quality Commission. Can you let us know a little bit about what you did there and how different it is going from the regulatory body side to being inspected as an organisation?
Yeah, absolutely. I spent 10 years at CQC, and so it was a really important part of my career and my life. And I started as an inspector, and I inspected, countless numbers of care homes and domiciliary care providers in the sort of Lincolnshire area predominantly. And then I moved over to become what's called an inspection manager, which was, running a team of inspectors. And it was at that time the Commission, widened its scope away from just social care inspections to GPs, dental, and secondary care. So I got quite heavily involved in all of that kind of arrangements. And I was also at the time when the chief executive changed and Sir David Behan came in and developed the whole ratings framework, which was all around quality improvement. And so I was quite heavily involved with that. I think towards the second half of my time at CQC, I had the great pleasure of working directly for Professor Steve Field, who was the Chief Inspector of Primary Care. And I worked very closely with him on developing the whole primary care inspection structure and how that whole methodology came together. And as we developed that, we then started to branch into how we could really sort of regulate and inspect the whole integrated care agenda as that was coming together. And the last part of my career at CQC, that's what I was doing. I was the head of inspection for London. And I was very much tasked with trying to work out how we could do regulatory inspections and quality improvement work across a whole wide range of providers, social care, primary care and secondary care, as well as independent care. So really interesting time at CQC. So that gave me a really good grounding, I think, to come over to provider land and see it from a different lens. And I think it's been really fascinating for me because I think I've been reflecting about the actions and the regulatory approach that I used to take at CQC, how that impacts in a provider and how a provider reacts to that. It's been really fascinating, actually. So it gave me a really good grounding to join a company the size of HC1 to understand how just, we can work better together to get improvement for residents.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously you mentioned there that you weren't just involved in sort of CQC for care providers either. There's such a huge range across health and social care. So I guess having that background in sort of and the knowledge in the other areas as well helps you to drive that improvement and the quality that you want to do at HC1 as well.
Well, because that's really important because you can't see social care in isolation. And I think sometimes historically social care has seen itself as a silo. And actually, the world that we now work in is very, very different. And we really do need to understand how primary care, secondary care, and other providers work together in a system to actually improve, resident patient care. And that's part not just about how people transfer between different care providers and different parts of the health and social care sector. It's also how the data flows. It's how we use information to improve outcomes. It's how we look at health inequalities across that wider system. And social care plays a massive role in that. But so for me, it's really important that you understand how all those bits of the system work so that, we can stand up to our responsibility to try and, move patients and residents through the system to the optimum way, really, I think.
Yeah. So how have you transferred your skills across from CQC to sort of that understanding the importance of driving that quality of care at HC1?
So I think, apart from sort of the in-depth technical knowledge around regulation and how the regulatory function works, and I think that's really important because I'm the nominated individual for HC1, so I'm sort of the accountable person to CQC and do all that sort of front-facing relationship with CQC. And you do need to have a degree of technical regulatory knowledge to be able to do that. But overwhelmingly, though, the key thing that I've been able to bring across is the understanding about how the ratings work. And ratings are not just an arbitrary kind of thing. They are actually, were originally designed to drive quality improvement. Because when I first joined CQC, it was all about compliance, and you were either compliant or not compliant with the regulations. And when the ratings framework came in, it was all about trying to foster an improvement culture and focusing around not just the fundamental safety standards in regulation, but actually how you can drive improvement forwards. And I think that I was so heavily involved at CQC in developing that ratings framework, and I really understand that, if you can embody what those characteristics of the ratings are, then you can really understand how you can drive improvement forward and what quality actually is. And quality is not compliance. Quality is something quite different. And I often find it interesting when I talk to operators or talk to other providers, how many of us have actually read what those ratings are, how they're arrived at, what the characteristics behind those ratings are. And actually, there's very few people actually understand how those ratings are put together and what the expectation is around them. So I think if you can really understand that, you can then start to move quality forward.
I think that's it, isn't it? Because if you don't understand what the ratings really mean behind them, and you're just literally looking at that one word or two words that it does, then you can't understand what you need to do to drive the quality improvement. It is all about improvement and providing the best quality of care at the end of the day, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you hear a lot of people say, I think this home is good, but CQC have rated it requires improvement, for example. But actually, we need to understand why that is the case. Why have they rated it requires improvement? It's not just some sort of arbitrary, subjective decision the inspectors made. Actually, they're working within an assessment framework, and they're using the characteristics of the ratings to understand why that services requires improvement. So you do need to understand what that is, and you do need to understand what that is so that you can know how to improve. And I think that a lot of my top tip to all providers is make sure you understand what the ratings framework is and what the syllabus is, as it were, and then that can help you drive the improvement forwards as well.
I think one of the things that that I was when we sort of we've talked before about something that you'd mentioned, which I found really interesting, was you're really passionate about having that good relationship with CQC and actively sharing information with them, which we know not everybody wants to share information. So how does HC1 evidence everything that you're doing to sort of keep your residents safe and to make sure that you're sort of following that those strategies and the aims that they have in place?
So, working with a regulator, and we work with 3 regulators, across the 3 countries we operate in, and we work on the same principle. Working with the regulator is about assurance. It's about providing the regulator with assurance, and that has to be a continual part of your work. It can't just be waiting for an inspection and then seeing what the outcome is, and then providing evidence to either challenge it or an action plan to address the issues. You have to do this on an ongoing basis and provide the regulator with assurance. Now, as the regulator is now moving to sort of some more remote monitoring as opposed to just relying on physical inspection, that's even more important. And this is about talking to inspectors. This is about talking to the inspection managers, the people. It's about engagement at a very strategic level in the commission to talk to them about what you're doing as a company, what your workforce strategy is, what your quality strategy is, what your approach to the management of your homes and the challenges, what your strategy in the future is around your portfolio of homes. There's that sort of level of conversation, and then there's a conversation about let's be really transparent. Let's be really transparent with you. I always recall that when we developed a new internal framework for quality assurance back in November 2020, and we came up with a whole sort of a really granular view that we would do internal assessments around 24 elements, and we'd rate each one of those 24 elements. So we'd have a real granularity of all the areas we needed to improve. We did that exercise, and we did a whole internal assessments for all of our homes. And the chief executive and myself, we actually showed CQC the outcome of all of that. And people kind of said to us, are you mad? Are you actually going to show the regulator where your failings are and where you needed to improve? And we said, absolutely we are. And we went through all of these 24 elements and we showed them exactly where our homes were. And we actually showed them that, there were a substantial number of homes in particular areas that needed to improve. And actually, the result of that has been a high level of assurance by the Commission that we know where our challenges are, and we have that granularity, and we understand what the issues are, and then we're able to articulate the journey about how we're going to improve those issues. So transparency is absolutely key, and we're working with the Commission at the moment to try and and as we develop our work with Radar Healthcare, is to give them access to this stuff. We want to give them access to our systems. We want to give them access as we move forward with digital care planning to our digital care planning systems, in the same way that GP inspectors can access GP systems remotely. We want to give them that transparency so that they can gain assurances about the work that we're doing to address where we've got areas that we need to improve.
And it goes back to what you mentioned at the beginning about ratings and the fact that ratings are there to improve things. And, the CQC are not there to catch people out. They're there to make sure residents are safe and actually have that best quality of care. And I think, from the CQC side and the care provider side, or whichever organisation is being inspected, the resident or the patient's, well-being is always at the heart of it. But I think sometimes they can almost forget that when there's so many other steps, I guess, involved in things. So I think having that positive working relationship together, and nobody's perfect, so actually showing those areas where you do want to improve can never be a bad thing.
No, absolutely. And the amount of times when I was at CQC, certainly as a head of inspection, you review all the challenges that come in from providers, whether that's through formal representations or just other letters of complaint, etc., etc. And I used to see providers that had a regulatory decision or an inspection or a piece of enforcement placed on them, and they would engage solicitors. They would spend hours and hours and awful lots of money challenging the Commission's decision. And when you're sat in CQC, you're sat there going, why don't you just fix the issue? Why are you expending all this energy and money challenging this? Why don't you just sort the problem out? And that's my approach in HC1. Actually, yes, we have some outcomes from CQC that aren't where we want them to be, but we're not going to stand there and challenge them, and we're not going to stand and spend a lot of energy doing that. We're actually going to understand what the issue is, work with the inspector to find out what the actual issues are and how we can improve that service. And that's where we put our energy, not into challenging all the time.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to look at it, without a doubt. So, going back to obviously the strategy side, and obviously, we know the CQC are sort of in the process of launching the new strategy. So, what's your thoughts on this, and how do you think that will help deliver improvement when it comes to the quality of care for residents or patients?
I think this is a really important moment. When I was in CQC, I've been through a couple of methodology changes, and I also saw that providers were very anxious or quite uneasy about it. And I think the reality is that there is those tensions at the moment in the health and social care sector about really trying to feel comfortable about CQC's new approach, about how the intelligence driven approach, the remote monitoring approach, less reliance on physical inspection activity. But I think let's not challenge it and let's not be anxious about it. Let's embrace the opportunity, because I think there's huge opportunities here. If you look at CQC's approach around, for example, its quality statements, and its I and we statements, they're really powerful pieces of work that we can embrace and use to, improve our own journey, because actually it's about seeing it through the residents' eyes. And then CQC's aspiration to use more intelligence and stuff. Well, I know there's anxiety in the sector about, well, what is this intelligence? What have they got? How are they going to rank it? How are they going to risk rate all of that? But actually, let's work with them to say, well, we can give you more information than you currently have. And with that will then allow you to have the context around that intelligence to give you an even better view. So I think there's great opportunities here. And I think what we need to do as CQC goes through this transformation is do less challenge, and feel less anxious about it, and say to CQC, let's work with you to get this to be the best it can possibly be. Because if their aspiration is to see it more through the resident experience or the patient experience, that's got to be the best thing, because that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Exactly. Going back to, they are at the heart of it all at the end of the day, aren't they? So, it needs to be them at the forefront.
Absolutely. People who work with me in HC1 know me quite well, that whenever we talk about a piece of work or anything we're doing on a day-to-day basis, I only ask one question: what's in it for the resident? And if there isn't anything for the resident, I don't actually see there's any reason that we have a conversation about it, and that might be in 2 or 3 years' time, or it might be more immediate than that. But if there's no outcome positive for a resident, there's absolutely no point doing it, in my view.
Yeah, and I think it's so easy, isn't it, sometimes to get tied up in just the day-to-day stuff, but actually having that question constantly in the back of your head is probably a really good way to look at it.
Absolutely, yeah.
So obviously, we know health and social care at the moment is in crisis. It's such a big talking topic across everyone, really. How do you think we can start and improve this and ultimately start and increase the quality of care where we can?
So, yeah, it's obvious, to all that, all of health and social care is under significant pressure, and the social care sector in particular. I think, we've got the challenges of workforce, we've got the challenges of post-COVID, and we're still trying to recover from the terrible couple of years that we've all experienced. And I think with the key challenge for all of us is the workforce. And I think that's not just about attracting people to work in social care, it's about retaining them once they're here. And I think the work that we're focusing on in HC1, I think it's really important to because fundamentally, people are what drives quality, And we have 3 pillars in our strategy, and it's called our purpose in action. But our strategy is firstly people, then quality, and then performance. So our whole mantra is: let's get the right people. Let's reward them, let's develop them, let's give them a professional career in social care. That will drive quality. And then once you get the quality right and you're driving quality improvement, performance in terms of commercial success will follow. Where providers often go wrong is they focus on the commercial success and try and drive people and the quality afterwards, but actually you need to get these fundamental building blocks in place. So for me, to drive quality, you need to get people, you need to have enough people to deliver care. You then need to reward them, and you need to pay them competitively, so that they are feeling that they're being recognised for the very difficult work that this is. You then need to develop people. You need to completely not just give them pieces of mandatory training, but actually give them a growth in the company and reward them for that growth and develop them in the company. So you kind of professionalize the sector. And I think this is really important. And, so when people join a company, that you then think about, well, how can you grow in this company so that you can start as a carer and you can end up as a registered manager or something else. And I think that's incredibly important. So that's about your sort of nursing apprenticeships, your nursing associate programs. It's about how you develop carers to become nurses if they wish to be, or to become senior carers. Or, we've got a nursing associate program, a nursing apprenticeship program. We've got a aspiring home manager program, so that carers and others can grow into those roles. And then you retain your workforce, because one of the real problems that social care has is that it can attract workers, but it can't retain them. So we've got to retain them, because if you retain them, then you get the continuity of care and you get a better outcome for your resident.
I think that's so important as well. I think, you think about any business and people going into it, and, everybody wants to develop, everybody wants to be the best version of themselves, I guess, within their work, whatever career that is. And I do think it's when you hear about social care in particular talked about, in the media and anywhere else, you never hear it being talked about as a career. You sort of hear it being talked about as it's a job as a carer, for example. It's, we know people see it as a vocation, and that's incredible. But I think for people to understand that actually it's such a good career to have, and to kind of, like you've just said, professionalize it more is so important.
Absolutely. And I think you're absolutely right, Justine, that, when you see outside and you hear people talk, they don't talk about social care as a career. But that's where we need to develop it, because, and I use that term, professionalize it. That's what we need to do. And and that doesn't matter if you're a nurse that's, in a professional development structure by the fact that you're a registered nurse. But I'm also talking about the carers. I'm talking about the people who work in the kitchen. I'm talking about the maintenance. I'm talking about, the administration in the homes. All of that needs to be thought as a profession and a career that we can grow people with, so that, if you might start as a kitchen assistant, for example, on 12 hours a week in the kitchen, what's to stop you moving into a caring role? What's to stop you combining those roles? What's to stop you then moving to getting a nurse qualification if you wish to be a nurse? Or what's to stop you becoming a deputy home manager or a home manager? Nothing can stop you, but you've got to create the structure for allow that to happen. And that's through pay banding structures. It's through in having growth conversations, that we call them in our homes, rather than an appraisal. We call them a growth conversation about how can you grow, how can you add value to the home, and ultimately then how can you improve the resident care. So all of this goes back to what I said a few moments ago, is actually what's in it for the resident. Well, what's in it for the resident in this case is having a workforce that is going to be continual. It's going to be there all the time. We get that continuity of care, but you've got a workforce that's invested in their own futures, because it's a proper career.
Yeah, and it's the continuity of care, obviously, as well for the resident, but also it's that creating relationships with your residents as well. It's especially for residents that maybe don't have families and people that visit them regularly, to have sort of, regular carers and, people that they see all the time, they develop relationships with as well. So again, that's another element of the importance of retaining your workforce, I think.
Well, absolutely, because you've hit the nail on the head, really, because fundamentally human beings are social and we need interactions with people. And I think we always have to remind ourselves that actually we're privileged in the work that we do, because this is people's homes. This is their life. It's quality of life. I talk a lot inside HC1 about not about quality, but quality of life, because we need to keep focusing on that we're actually, this is people's homes, this is their lives, and therefore just because they come into a care home, they don't stop wanting that social interaction. That's hugely important. And actually, quite a lot of negative regulatory outcomes from CQC are often based on that lack of interaction, because it's a task-driven process. Actually, let's focus it back on the community that a care home is. And it is a community. It's a small community where people develop relationships, and they need that constant set of interactions. And imagine a scenario if you were in a care home or a hotel or whatever, and the people you were dealing with constantly change, and you don't know who they are. You haven't built those relationships. It's very, very difficult, and we can make such a difference to our residents' lives if we keep the same people with that same level of interaction constantly.
Yeah, without a doubt, I think that's a really strong thing to take away from this. I think going back to that quality of life and you people trying to drive improvement and things like that, when you were at the CQC, was there anything, sort of any common things that you saw on a regular basis that care providers could fix fairly easily?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's always frustration when you're a CQC inspector, when you go into a care home, about some kind of things that you just expect that should be there. So medicines is a big issue, I think. And I'm not talking necessarily about, the technicalities of administering the right medicine at the right time, which is hugely important, but actually just stupid things that providers do all the time, like leaving the medicines room unlocked, not disposing of medicines properly, not checking them in properly, not dating boxes or bottles as you should do. Really kind of simple things. Fridge temperatures, which just drive everybody mad because people don't log them correctly, and those sort of real sort of basic things. But fundamentally, when I did inspection activity, we used a tool called SOFI, which was the Short Observational Framework for Inspection, which was developed by Bradford University. And it's all about interaction of people. And we've just introduced it into HC1, into our assessment framework. And I know CQC are reintroducing it as and reinvigorating it inside CQC as also. And that tool allows you to monitor the interactions that your staff have with people. And it's that thing about, if a resident's walking down a corridor, do the staff just walk past them because they're going to deal with a task somewhere and they don't talk to them? Is it when they go into the lounge, and offer them a drink, that they don't talk to them? They just say, here's a cup of tea, and those interactions are hugely important. And I think as an inspector, I used to get very frustrated when I sat in a communal area or in the dining room or just, walking around a corridor, and I didn't see the staff interact with people. And that makes such a huge difference, I think.
I imagine it makes a massive difference in the feel as well, and the kind of, how it comes across. As, like you mentioned before, it is a home. So I can imagine just having that, it almost uplifts the whole atmosphere as well.
Yeah, because you used to, I always talk about that you can get a sense from a care home the moment you walk in it. In the same way we make judgments the moment we walk into a hotel, the moment we walk into a restaurant, we all make those judgments. Oh, this feels nice. This looks good. I think I'm going to be, I'd like to have a meal here. I'd like to stay here for the night. And it's the same in a care home. You get that feel the moment you walk in. And I think, and often, the better outcomes regulatory weren't in the 5-star glossy, recently refurbished care homes, because they didn't have the right atmosphere. Actually, I used to give better regulatory outcomes, I think, in buildings that potentially you might think were a little bit tired and needed some refresh. But actually the atmosphere in the home and the homely environment was very, very different. And they were the best care homes, and I think that's what we need to focus on as well, because just having a glossy building that's fabulous, and that is important, and I don't think for a minute it isn't. But if you don't get that staff interaction right, and then focusing around the quality of life for the resident, then you're not going to get that homely atmosphere. And I think, let's just go back to, I know it's very old fashioned, but the mum's test. Would this be good enough for my mum? Would I want my mum to live here? Would my mum be happy here? If you focus it through that lens, then it takes you to the place you need to be.
Yeah, but it becomes a motive again, doesn't it? Which is something that's so important. So we've talked a little bit earlier about transparency for between care providers and CQC. So have you got any advice or tips on what else care providers could do to create a more open dialogue of communication with their CQC inspectors, and how they can share best practice?
I know, and I can see this from my experience in CQC as well, I think, is that you need to be proactive about it. Of course, your local inspectors or your local inspection teams will contact you when there's a problem or a concern that they have. But actually, just before that, I encourage all of our home managers to make their contact with their inspectors, and invite them to either come in or have a call. Just build that relationship and work with them constantly, and in a really sort of way that you don't need to be fearful of. And don't wait for CQC to receive a piece of information and then ask you about it. So if something happens in a home, and things always happen in homes that are not where you'd want them to be, contact the inspector. Some things obviously you have to notify because it's a requirement to do so, but actually just talk to them. And explain what's going on in your home. They will get a lot of assurance from that. But you have to be proactive about it, and contact the inspector. For those people who are sort of a more corporate level, then contact the heads of inspection. Contact the right at the top of the tree, and do that, and talk to them and build those relationships. So across our, we've got 280 homes registered with CQC in England, and quite often I'm on the phone to inspectors. And I just talk to them about what's going on in our homes, or they talk to me about what's going on in our homes, and quite often they'll just come to me as the NI and just say, Anthony, how's it going in this home? They'll just drop me an email, or we've heard something about this home. What's your take on it? And we've got that relationship that means we don't have to get into a regulatory situation. We can just build those relationships, but it needs to be at all levels in the company, and just go out there and build them, because I can assure you the CQC inspectors will really appreciate it.
I think that's a great point to end on as well. I think this episode has been really informative for our listeners, which is great. At the end of every episode, we ask everybody what the health tech moment is. So it's just about listening to lots of weird and wonderful and lovely stories from across the industry. So Anthony, what's your health tech moment?
Okay, thank you. I've just given this some thought, because I think every day there's things that absolutely just blow me away. This is really quite simple. I'm sort of got these sort of little obsessions every now and again. And one of my current obsessions is about making sure people have enough to drink, and making sure they're fully hydrated. And that's a real challenge. And it's a real challenge in the sense of knowing how much people have drunk, and with that, and one of my homes came to me and said, Anthony, we've just bought these smart water bottles. And I sort of knew about these because a relative of mine had one of these once. And I thought, hang on a minute, let's really work out how we could use this. And in a couple of our homes, we've bought these smart water bottles, and they've got a little chip in the bottom of them that measures the weight of the water. And we can just track it on people's phones, how much they've had to drink each day. And also, we can track whether they've picked the bottle up or not. And we can also track whether the bottle's fallen over. Just really simple. Doesn't cost a lot of money. But actually, we've been able to demonstrate that these people are drinking much more each day, and or they're not picking the bottle up. So we go and encourage them to have a drink. And it's made such a difference. And already in about a month, it's made a difference to how people's well-being is in that home. And the whole, we talked about the atmosphere. Actually, it's incredible that once people are getting enough hydration, the change in the atmosphere and the change in how much they want to talk and interact with people. So I think that was just an incredible thing that's just a really quite simple piece of technology which can really make such a difference.
Oh, that's amazing. Like you said, the power of a small piece of technology and how that like you just said, how it can make a difference.
Because we all focus on
the
big ticket technology stuff, all the powerful stuff that radar can do, all the powerful stuff that e-care solutions can do. But actually there's some really simple stuff out there, and every day I see more and more of it that we can just embrace, and I think, I also talked once before about our, people using Amazon Alexas to call the kitchen and ask for a drink to be brought up to them. And I thought that was just fantastic, because why can't people have a drink when they want to have a drink? And why can't they request for it if they're in the room on the third floor, and they don't feel able to go and get a drink themselves? Why can't they request it? And why should they have to press a call bell and wait for that to be answered, when actually they could just use a simple bit of tech that we've all got in our homes to just ask for it,
Yeah, it's using technology in the right way, basically, isn't it? To make that difference to somebody's quality of life again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, thank you very much for today, Antony. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you as always. Thank you everyone else for joining us this week, and thank you for listening. Join us again next week for another new episode, and don't forget to rate and subscribe. And if you have any questions for us or our guests, please email whatthehealthtech@radarhealthcare.com.